Oh, hi. Uh, I was actually thinking of that more in the humorous terms of maybe something more like Bill Murray would have done at some point, like um, in his original heyday, or maybe his like secondary heyday, because I think the Bruce Springsteen, the Bill Murray that I grew up with was the Bill Murray of the '90s, which wasn't the Bill Murray of the '80s. Although, of course, Ghostbusters was still a big movie, and like Ghostbusters 2 maybe and stuff. But that oh hey thing was coming more from like a Bill Murray kind of reference point than it would have been like a Tim and Eric kind of reference point. Red Cow Arcade talked about this recently, where they said, they were sort of criticizing. Well, it's funny because Red Cow Arcade generally is two guys, and they're just sort of talking about media stuff or YouTube stuff, and they're one of the guys criticizes the sort of, he said, like, I think he said maybe like public access TV kind of stuff, where the humor is like them acting like they're bad actors on public access TV, telling you something in an overly excited way that they're not actually excited about and they're not even sure about. And, like that, Tim and Eric, Tim and Eric's Awesome Show, great job. I think they might have been the progenitors of that. Like, I think of that movement in comedy, I think they might have been the guys. I mean, I guess it was sort of, I guess that was sort of the natural extension of like the ironic TV shows and media stuff that David Foster Wallace talks about. Um, like, oh, it's all about, it becomes so much about irony that it sort of like loses any substance in itself, or like loses a lot of its own kind of thing, and it just all becomes so basically shallow and superficial, and just like basically I'd even bring it so far as to say like it becomes just like hating everything because it's there. Like that's the irony, like the Family Guy kind of thing of like, not that Family Guy always seems to like hate the things it's talking about, but it's kind of mean spirited. You could say, well, they're celebrating the things they're talking about, but they're really like, it's maybe earlier in Family Guy or something. I mean, I don't know. It feels like there's a mean spirited vibe to everything in Family Guy, I guess. And not to say it can't be screamingly funny, but like when they're just it's like when they're just referring to like the Kool-Aid guy or something. It's not saying anything about Kool-Aid. It's not like telling us, it's not even talking about like the Kool-Aid drink itself. It's just like the Kool-Aid guy character, really, and him like barging into a scene that was like dramatic. And even that is a more, like, that's really a more substantial Family Guy joke than many, because he's barging into a scene that they've set up through like the story of that particular episode, and they're in a courtroom and it's like a big dramatic scene, and then the Kool-Aid man barges in, and it's like, it's kind of funny. He says like, "Hey guys," or whatever whatever he says, and it was screamingly funny. It was hilarious back in the day, but if you look at it, like, it really is just kind of almost like the most purified, like crack cocaine form of like irony. It's like the irony is that he's even there. But anyway, yeah. So I'm not sure if I'm going to get back to what I was talking about there, but I've been I've been able to take a little time off recently, which has been very nice. I've been going so hard for so long in so many different like shades of terror, or just anxiety, or just like just pure suffering, for years. The whole like you can read my channel description, but the whole like I went through a federal conviction process for sending somebody angry emails. It was literally speech crimes, as somebody in one of the jails said. You're here for words, and not in an angry way at at me, but sort of in a wondering way at the situation itself. And it is just it's been a tough walk. That was like more than a year in in either one jail or another, more than a year total of that. And then 3 years of, being out. Like, I guess, I think I was in there probably just long enough to have felt a real, like, huge shift, like, walking out of that building. And, like, my uncle picked me up with my aunt and my mom, and it felt like it felt like floating. Like, it felt like being, like, truly, like, it felt like being on a drug or something in terms of, like, how different things felt. Like, how shockingly different. Like, it felt like floating. And I wouldn't even be allowed to legally smoke pot or legally drink for 3 years. 3 years of not being able to drink alcohol at all or smoke pot, which is legal where I live, at all. 3 years. And, I mean, that wasn't like the worst. That wasn't the worst of it, but that was part of it. Also, not being able to play my newer video game systems. 3 years after spending more than a year in jail. The greater part of 2 years, actually, I think. And but still, when I got out, I felt like I had altered consciousness in a way that, like, a few moments in my life might be that similar to. It was like floating. And yet, soon enough, and it stayed that way. Like, it was like a huge relief. Like, I stayed, I was not even allowed to stay at my mom's house for the entirety of my probation. Like, I was able to go and visit her and stuff and stay there for, like, maybe, like, stay over I don't know if I ever stayed overnight, actually. Did I even ever stay overnight once? I think I probably did. But, yeah, I could stay overnight, but the thing was, like, I couldn't live there. Like, I could go there to visit, but I couldn't live there. It's like, Matt, why would you aspire to live with your mom anyway? It's like, no, the thing is, before I went to jail, like, that was the main thing. Like, I literally said to someone, this was before I had any idea that that was all going to happen. I literally said to someone, like, it was actually sort of a famous last words thing. It was sort of a real spiritual moment, but I was like, as long as I'm living out on my own, or I'm not living at my mom's house in like 3 years, then I'll be doing well, or something like that. And then it's like, well, you weren't living at your mom's house. You may have, whatever time frame it was. I think the time it would have been was either being in jail or being on probation, and indeed living on my own for almost the entire probation. Really, looking back on it, it was about I think, like, yeah, just over a couple months after getting off probation. Basically, like, the person whom I was staying with sort of got me connected to rent an apartment, and that person had also, here's the thing, they prodded me too, like, in terms of, like, they said, like, yeah, I think you should get a job, like, but they said it sort of firmly, and I was staying at their house, so it's like, all right, but they were like, I think you should get a job. And then I went out and I applied. They actually drove me, like, they drove me all the way to Dunkin' Donuts, and I got out and I took a job thing there. But then I went over and got a job where I actually was going to get one at the universe of possible things that I might have gotten a job in. But in any case, wherever I did end up getting a job, I went over there, applied, they hired me on the spot, me bringing my application back and everything. And it was the one I wanted, like, of the local shopping center. It was like, this seems like the job that I'd most like to have if I were to work at one of these places. And, it was pretty good for what it was. It was pretty good. Like, there were, all things considered, there were some pretty nice guys working there. And, it was pretty easygoing, but it was also pretty, kind of fun. Like, you were boxing things up for people, you were, it's recommending like, oh, for this, what box do I think this goes in? So like someone would bring something and by size, like you had your little measuring tape and stuff, but like you'd basically like size things up to be boxed while someone was standing there like saying, I'd like to send this out. And you'd also be telling them like, this is the price if you get it this fast, this is the price if you get it there this fast. We might be able to do it this fast, no guarantee, but there is a guarantee on that one maybe, or like, and then, you know, oh, these are the international shipments, you have to sign this paper and that paper, and like, it was, you know, like one of the guys there told me, he's straight up, he's like, you know, he's like, it's not a hard job, he's like, you can't be a dummy, but it's not a hard job, and it's like, yeah, it's like, it was easy enough, but at the same time, there were enough moving parts. Actually, one or more of those guys like were kind of interested in Legos in some capacity, and it was sort of like putting Legos together, working out that store. It was, you know, it was kind of fun. And anyway, but yeah, from that time, like, so I had that job for like a month or so, and then I got connected with the place that I would stay at for a year or so, and then I got a different place for the other 2 years, basically. And it did pretty much work out like that. I still technically am renting that other place, but I'm not there anymore, and I'm just waiting for it to run out. I was actually lucky enough, I told them, like, hey, if you've got someone who wants to move in sooner than my lease is over, like, you know, I'm ready to leave any time. And I was lucky enough that they said, yeah, someone would like to move in like a month early. And I was like, great, that's 1 month less that I don't have to pay for this place I'm not staying at anyway. But anyway, and that's current. But so currently I still have my own place. And hopefully soon I will again. But famous last words, it was not just being like out of my mom's house that would make things great. So looking back on it, the only, interestingly enough, like while I was in jail, like they literally had told me like, you know, one of your restrictions, or maybe they told me that, I think they might have told me that when they sentenced me, which was like just a month or maybe a little longer than 2 months before I actually left, because they pushed back my sentencing like I think literally 6 or 7 times over the span of like it was supposed to be December of 1 year. It turned out to be August of the next year. That was my sentencing, and they pushed it out multiple times within that time frame. It was a mess, and it was horrible the whole time, and I was terrified the whole time. And you can look into mattthoughts.com, look into videos on mixed metaphors on YouTube, or look into videos on my Rumble channels, LGOE period. That's LGOE, and then with no space, PERIOD, or MATT space SHTICK. I talk about the whole story, and you can look at my little channel description here. I talk about the story in more detail of like why it was terrifying, and you know some of the elements that went into the thing being pushed out so long, and how I made a certain decision about like whether to say no, I won't do this until you guys follow back and like have it recorded or something. That didn't turn out well for me. But it might have, you know, who knows otherwise what it might have turned out as, because it was like there were only 2 or so weeks until my sentencing, and I think this turned out to be the final sentencing date, if not the second to last possible sentencing date. It was only like a couple weeks left, and I was having an interview with like someone for the other side, basically, and they were gonna do the interview without recording it, and I was like, no, I'd like to have this thing fucking recorded, and the guy's like, well, if we record it, then I'd have to ask the other people for permission to do that and blah, blah, blah. And basically it was like, it was an impasse, and it was like, if you have this interview recorded, which you really should, anytime you ever have anything legal ever at all, have it recorded. Please, seriously. And I should have had it recorded there. But the thing was, if I said, no, I want it recorded, and so I'd like you to go ask your people and get permission to have this recorded, or I won't have it, or something like that. I should have, like, basically said something like that. Because, what, you're going to record all the other shit that I do, but then when it's your guys talking to me and writing something antagonistic, or that turned out to be antagonistic anyway, you're going to do a fucking 10-hour interview with me over 2 parts, about 10 hours over 2 separate interview periods. It was so long, and you're not going to record any of it, and then we're just going to rely on your level of honorability and trust and honor to say, like, oh, yeah, this is all legit. It's like my lawyer ended up referring to it as quote, the biggest hack job, unquote, he'd, quote, ever seen, unquote. You know, and this was a guy he said he had worked with, and then he said, I'm never working with him again for what he did to you. Like, or like not like a personal vendetta maybe so much, like what he did to you, but like what he did here, I'm never working with that guy again. Like, it was fucking serious what happened to me, and it was because it was like, if you don't say yes to have this not recorded and have this interview today, or maybe like have a second part of it like as a soon follow-up, although given that there was a follow-up, I imagine I could have waited that long to have the first interview and said, no, I need it recorded. But in any case, it's like, if you don't say yes to have this not recorded and basically leave it up to the whims of this guy to be as accurate as he wants to be, and the judge to have any interest at all in how accurate he was or wasn't being in an unrecorded fucking interview that went on for hours and hours and hours and hours, and more than that even, like more than 8 hours, I think it was like 10 hours or so. This fucking guy, he's gonna have this interview with you unrecorded? But of course I sat there and it was like, oh shit, it was like, this sentencing date is coming up, and I don't know if my lawyer had said this to me, like, or if if the guy even who was saying he wouldn't record it without permission from somebody else, if that guy is the person who said it here. But I think somebody might have said, like, basically, you know, somebody might have said this, or this might have just come together for me because of like the experience prior in the whole process. But it was basically like, if you wait for him to go ask other people to be able to record this interview, and then you wait for everyone's schedules to align again, where you can not only have this interview, but then you can also have it be quick enough that they can still make it to the sentencing date on time without pushing it back again. And then who knows when everyone's schedule associated with the sentencing are going to align again for a fucking sentencing date. They might have pushed this thing out. I mean, who knows? Maybe it would have been a week. Maybe it would have been a month. Maybe it would have been another 3 months. And at that point, it was like, I've already been here, like, literally longer, I think, than I was originally told I was supposed to be here if I did a plea bargain on something. And then they added another charge that was basically, as it was presented to me, it was basically just a clone charge of the first charge with like almost the same wording as it was presented to me. I might be mistaking things here, but it had a really mean sound to it. It was cyber stalking. Yeah, oh, cyber stalking. I looked this guy's email address up on his public profile on his organization thing, and then I sent him some emails. That's cyber stalking. Really? Like stalking? Looking someone's email address up on a public page that's presented publicly with their public profile saying, this is who this is. Here's his email address. On a very prominent organization website. It's like, really? And I'm not going to say who it is or what it is. That A, that doesn't matter. B, I think I'd probably get in trouble for saying it, so I won't say it. But it was literally, really me. It was me looking this guy's email address up once, and they put on a cyber stalking charge that added, like, I think, like, it might have added as much as 4 or even as, I don't know, like, it added another, like, 4 months or something. Like, basically, my lawyer went from saying, this December, you might get time served, to, well, they added this extra charge, so you're probably not going to get time served. But, you know, maybe, but who knows? But, like, it expanded the timeline in itself, just basically them saying, you did this again from what was presented to me. It was basically just them saying the same thing twice. One charge here, one charge there. But one charge had a really scary name, spooky name, cyberstalking, that had nothing to do, by the sounds of it, with the case at all, unless you consider that man's public profile a fucking sting operation, and anyone who gets his email address that he publicly presented so that people could get and uses it is guilty of cyberstalking. Anyway, as you can tell, I've been through fucking endless bullshit. And so here I was, and they were like, I'd have to go ask these people, if we're going to have the interview actually recorded, even though I think we were doing it on Zoom. It was during that time. And we were doing it on Zoom. And of course, Zoom, like suddenly Zoom is the most popular thing in the world, but nobody knew what it was like 2 months before then. But suddenly with this whole big story that seems to be told about things that are going on in the world, maybe Zoom becomes super popular and it becomes ubiquitous all of a sudden. Really? Really? It's like, well, that was just the best application for doing the conference stuff over the computer. Anyway, as far as I understood, he could have literally just clicked record session, basically, and recorded it. So it would have been little to no extra effort. The effort of sliding your finger on a little touchpad and pressing down, maybe pressing down a couple of times and sliding it a couple of times to get it to say, okay, yes, I really want you to record this.